Melissa is a pediatric nurse practitioner and probably started out like a lot of you guys, getting prereqs done for school. She went to Bunker Hill Community College in Boston, and then went on to Northeastern University and did an accelerated program from the BSN to nurse practitioner. So if you guys aren't in the Facebook study groups, just let me know in the chat and I will drop those links. Definitely a good place to be. I know the TEAS group has something like almost 9,000 students in there who all are really just helping each other out, and it's just a great place to be. And if you have questions or need help on stuff, you can post there and get comments immediately. And so Melissa and I were actually chatting just a little bit before this, and she'll preface this as well, but she was like, there is a lot to the muscular system. It's very detailed, and it's kind of something that even after going through this lesson module, depending on how familiar you are with this particular system and really A&P in general, it may be something that you need to do your own kind of deeper dive into on top of what you'll see here. A lot of students have taken A&P 1 and 2, or they may have taken A&P in high school. So for those folks, this is going to make a lot more sense, but this is one of the more in-depth systems. So you guys will probably run into that. So if things are confusing, just drop your questions or any things you want to go over in the chat, and we'll make sure that we go over those again. So with all that said, I think Melissa should be able to unmute herself and go ahead and share her screen, and then we should be good to go.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Give me a yes in the chat, a no in the chat. Okay. So, as you all know, tonight we are going to talk about the muscular system. So the muscular system, it's not very long, but there are parts of it, the anatomy of a muscle, that get a little confusing. So I'll just go over it briefly and we'll talk about it then. So visualizations and images are going to be best for this. So in this lesson tonight, the muscular system, we will talk about the 3 different muscle tissues. We'll describe the role of the muscular system in movement and the physiology of muscle contraction. Fun fact regarding muscles, there's over 600 muscles in the body. All the muscles are grouped according to their characteristics, like size, shape, and location, like the cardiac muscle, the skeletal muscle, etc. So you're going to want to know like what a cardiac muscle is, skeletal muscle. You're not going to need to know 600 muscles, so don't worry about that. So, okay, so we have the muscular system. It's responsible for body movement. Some other functions of this system include providing support to the body, stabilizing joints, and generating heat for the body. All muscles consist of specialized cells known as muscle fibers. These muscle fibers contract to facilitate body movement. So for the body to move, muscles have to be attached to the bones. We did the skeletal system the other night, and I was mentioning that bones themselves don't move. So if you were just a body of bones and no muscles, you're not going anywhere. They need help, and muscles help them move. So the muscles are attached to bones. They are also attached to internal organs and blood vessels. So muscles are attached to the stomach and the bladder, and they help these organs move and work. So basically, most of the body's movements actually occur because muscle contractions of from the muscle fibers in the muscles. So as you see here in this image, the body is made up of 3 types of muscles. We have the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and skeletal muscle. Here in the image, you can see each muscle cell broken down. So here's the cardiac muscle, here's the skeletal muscle, and here's the smooth muscle. They all look different, and they perform different functions. So we have the cardiac muscle. The cardiac muscle cell, you're only going to find that in the heart. All right. This muscle is striated, short, and branched. And it has one nucleus. A way to think of this, the cardiac muscle, to remember it, think of how a heart looks. You see how this heart over here? It's got the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava coming into the heart, and then you have the aorta, the ascending and the descending coming out of the heart. So it looks like it has branches, right? So the cardiac muscle is branched. So a good way to remember that. Cardiac muscle, the contraction of the heart, how our heart pumps, is actually involuntary, which means we don't control our heartbeat. And as you may remember, it's under the control of the autonomic nervous system. And all of cardiac muscles, you can find them in the walls of the heart. You're not going to find them anywhere else in the body. You won't find them in the bladder or the stomach. So then we have the skeletal muscle. Here's what a skeletal muscle generally looks like. This is striated, it's long, and it's cylindrical, meaning it looks like a cylinder. There's these specific cells, the skeletals, have multiple nuclei within the muscle cell. These are attached to the skeletal muscles you'll find attached to bones in the body. And by causing, they help, like we mentioned before, they help the body, they help the bones move, but through voluntary muscle contractions, meaning we can control the actions of these muscles. So your arm is straight, you can bend it because you are telling your arm to bend. You are not telling your heart muscle to pump blood through your body. Okay. And a way to remember how a skeletal muscle looks like, it's cylindrical. So think that a skeletal muscle is going to go with a long bone. A long bone is long and cylindrical down the middle. So think of that to match a long bone with the skeletal muscle cell. And then finally, we have the smooth muscle. This muscle is non-striated. So as you can see here, there's no lines in it. It's just line-free, non-striated. And it's shaped like a spindle. And like cardiac muscles, the smooth muscles only have one nucleus. So the skeletal cell is the only one with multiple nuclei within it. Here we have single nucleus. And you'll find this type of muscle in internal organs like the bladder, the stomach. Again, the smooth muscle contractions are involuntary like the heart. We don't control it, and it's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So the way that your digestive system works is basically a muscle. As food is, broken down in the stomach, it eventually gets pushed along into throughout the path of the digestive system, and that's all through muscles, the smooth muscles within those internal organs. And the same thing for bladder. That's a muscle, and that's how the urine is able to go out of your body. So 3 types of muscle tissues: cardiac, smooth, skeletal. You'll want to know these. You'll want to know what they look like, and you want to know where they are located and what they do. So despite the differences between the 3 muscle cells, the cardiac, smooth, and skeletal, they share 4 properties. These properties are excitability, contractility, means muscle shortening, extensibility, which is muscle stretching, and elasticity. Okay. So this is what the muscle cells do. Even though they're 3 different types of muscles, they all do the same thing. So in this lesson, we also have some questions. This is great for when you're studying, to just a brief review of that section. So let's do this question here, and then type in your answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D. So what is the purpose of the muscular system? Connects one bone to another, helps the bones of the body move, protects the body from external injury, or determines how blood circulates in the body? A, B, C, or D? What does everyone think it is?
I've got most people saying B, so that looks like we're all on the same page there.
All right, let's check it out. Yes, you're correct. It helps the bones of the body move. We need bones to be upright and have a body that stays up and in place, and we need the muscles to help those bones move. Without them, nothing's going anywhere. Okay, so skeletal muscle anatomy. Okay, again, images are going to be great. Okay, so just stick with me on this. So, like we mentioned many times, bones move with the help of the skeletal muscles through contraction and extension. So contraction is going in and extending it long. These specific muscles have to be attached to the bones to pull on the bones and cause them to move. So the movement occurs when the skeletal muscle shortens or contracts. So here you can see in the video, the image, the connective tissue attaches skeletal muscle to bone or other tissues. So this is going to be the skeletal muscle tissue, and here's the bone. It's connected, and it's going to be connected to another bone. Okay. So skeletal muscle consists of 3 types of connective tissue. We have the endomysium right here, endomysium here, and also here. The endomysium encases individual skeletal muscle fibers. These fibers are bundled together by connective tissue called the paramysium. All right, the paramysium. Bundles of skeletal muscle fibers are called fascicles. Right here, the fascicle here. Each fascicle is then bundled together by strong connective tissue called the epimysium, which is this guy. Okay, so basically breaking it down from what's on the inside to the outside. Okay, so give me 1 second. Yeah, all right. Here we go. We need this picture now. So we have a cell membrane that surrounds the skeletal muscle fiber, and it's called the sarcolemma. The cytoplasm of the skeletal muscle fiber is the sarcoplasm. One muscle fiber is filled with several long cylindrical proteins called myofibrils. These are the contractile units of the fiber. So the smallest contractile unit in a myofibril is a sarcomere. Okay. Several protein myofilaments make up a myofibril. And now there's 2 types of myofilaments. We have thick bands and thin bands. Thick bands are made of several different types of proteins called myosin. And there's several protein molecules called actin. These link together to form the thin bands. And the thin actin bands are attached to a Z disc or a Z line. All right. I know that's a lot. That's a real mouthful. There's a lot of parts. It's a lot of it is you're going to need to break it down. You're going to need to take the time and look at the images, write down the terms, write down what the term is, where it is, and just break it down on your own study thing. This is just a quick review.
Yeah,
More complicated muscle parts.
I asked a few people how it's going so far. Is this all making sense? And I'm getting nope, LOL.
You definitely spend more time on it. It's a little part of the muscle fibers and whatnot. Just when you do study it, break it down. Know what the Z lines are, know what the sarcomeres are, the myosin, the actin, know what those major terms are and know how they work. So basically what we basically did, we're like, here's the muscles, here's our muscles, these are the different muscle cells. Then you get down into the actual muscle itself, what makes up the muscle itself, and then even deeper, even smaller of what makes up that muscle. So for most of you, this should be a review. If it's totally left your brain since you last went to school or whatnot, just, you know, take the time, study it slowly, break it down piece by piece, and look at images, watch videos, and you'll kind of get the gist of it. Okay, so I apologize that it's sort of confusing. Okay, so we have another question here, and this is not multiple choice, so we gotta kind of remember some terms that I said. What is the smallest contractile unit of the skeletal muscle? So type in your answer if you remember that. What is the smallest contractile unit of the skeletal muscle? I think you guys are right. Okay, let's talk about the slide filament theory. This explains muscle contraction. Okay, so according to this theory, all right. So this theory, actin filaments slide past myosin filaments, pulling the actin filaments closer to the center of the sarcomere, or the M line. You know, the sliding action happens because of interactions between the heads of the actin and the myosin. So the heads of the actin and the myosin, okay? The heads of the myosin form attachments with the actin myofilaments. And these attachments are known as cross bridges. So the slide filament theory, you have the actin, the myosin, and basically they're going back and forth, which helps make the contraction of the muscle. That's bringing the muscle closer versus extending it. All right. So here you see it has, you know, with the help of the energy in the form of ATP, the myosin heads are then energized to attach to the binding sites in actin and form that cross bridge, like we mentioned. So after the energy in the myosin head is released, the myosin pulls actin myofilaments closer to the M line. So this head can only form another cross bridge with another molecule of ATP if it attaches to the head, which will re-energize it. Calcium also really important in the role in determining when contraction happens. So this, and you know, and the ion is found in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which surrounds the myofibrils. That being said, all of that being said, I know you're confused. I said this before. Go back, slowly study it. If you still have anatomy and physiology textbooks, that's great. That would be a good resource for you because that's where all that full information is. Remember, these are reviews, and it's always good to refresh our memories on those things that we, you know, when you take the test, you're not going to get 50 questions about everything we just mentioned. So know the basics, break it down, try and memorize it, know what it does, how it works, and you should be good. Okay, let's do this question here. What structure is re-energized with ATP? Do we remember? Getting a lot of myosin. Okay.
We get a lot of B for myosin, a couple 1A. But it's interesting between these group tutoring sessions, between the different subjects. We've done math and A&P, and like Melissa kind of outlined, this is one of the more difficult ones. So we see a little bit more mixed answers, where usually everybody's definitely on the same page, but actually everybody's coming in with B myosin. So I think we're on the right track. Melissa, what's the right answer?
Check out B. Yay. All right. Not going to go over it because we just went over that. But as you can see, there's the questions throughout the lessons, and they give you a little bit more information on why that's correct. Okay. So movement. We know that muscles help the bones move, but how does it do that? And that's through ligaments, tendons, joints. This is where the muscular system and the skeletal system really interact with each other. So we have ligaments. Ligaments attach bones to bones, and by doing that, they form a joint. I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with what a joint is. A joint is the site where two bones meet. So the bones, we don't have just one giant bone in our body. We have 206 bones as an adult, 270 as a baby. So the bones need to connect to each other like a puzzle, and they need to be connected by something, almost like a glue, but not a glue because they don't want to move. So they're like rubber bands, basically. So these joints, there's three types of joints. We have immovable joints. They're fibrous joints. They are basically almost like bones that are glued together, but with connective tissues. They are in very close contact, and they're called immovable because they don't move. So you'll find these in the skull. You know how if you see a picture of a skull, it's almost like a little puzzle on top of the head, and those are immovable joints that don't really move, but they are connected by like a soft connective tissue, but strong. Then you have partly movable joints, which are cartilaginous joints. They are held together by cartilage. These allow some degree of movement, and that's meaning there's some movement. It's not a super flexible joint. So usually you'll find these in the spine, in the vertebrae and the discs of the spine. Your spine moves. Some people are more flexible than others in their back. And that's because we have partly movable joints, but there are some motions that the human body just can't do because of this type of joint. And then we have synovial joints, and these are most of the joints around the rest of the body that give us the most freedom. And these specific joints are separated by joint cavities. So there's different types of joints within the synovial family, and they provide different types of movement. So there's those guys. And like I mentioned before, the muscular system works with the skeletal system to move the body. So the muscles are attached to the bone, and the tendons attach the muscles to the bone. So you definitely want to know, we mentioned before, ligaments attached bones to bones, tendons attach muscle to bone. When I was learning this, I, for some reason, remembered it as TMB, tendon, muscle, bone, and LBB, ligament, bone, bone. For some reason, that helped me remember that tendons connected muscles to bones and ligaments bone to bone. Just one of those quirky study things. So the tendons attach muscle to bone, TMB, and they consist of a tough connective tissue that's found on either side of the joint where the bones are connected. And they work with the skeletal muscles to move the bones. And so when muscles contract, which means they come in, they're going to shorten, and this pulls on the bones with the help of the tendon to allow the body to move. And when they're extended, it's just kind of a looser, less strong movement going the other way. And then muscles also work in pairs to move bones at the joint. So, you know, since the bones are connected through these tendons, sorry. So the tendons and the muscles connect to a bone, but they also have to connect to somewhere else. Otherwise they wouldn't move. And the muscle that causes a joint to bend is called a flexor muscle. And the muscle that contracts and causes a joint to straighten is an extension muscle, sorry. So if one muscle in the pair contracts, the other remains elongated and vice versa. An example of this is the biceps and tricep muscles in the arm, and they work together to bend and lengthen the elbow. As a bicep, you know, if you put your arm up and you make a muscle, that one on top there, that's your bicep. As it contracts, the tricep, which is on the back side of your arm, remains elongated and relaxed. So the bicep is a flexor and the tricep is the extensor of the elbow joint. We have another question here. Oh, wait, here's an image here. So we have muscle, tendon, bone, ligaments, connect bone to bone. The tendon connects the muscle to the bone. All right, so let's do this question. How many muscles must work together during contraction and extension? Remember, we just talked about this with the biceps and the triceps. What do we think that number is?
Everybody's coming in with 2, and I think it's pretty unanimous. It's going to be a 2. And then after this, there was a question or two, Melissa, so we'll cover those after we answer this question.
All right, let's check 2. Yes, because they work in pairs. We have the contraction and extension. When one contracts, the other extends or relaxes. All right.
Cool.
And I just wanted to go over this real quick. So we mentioned there's 3 different types of joints. We have the immovable, partly movable, and the synovial joints. Those joints are actually characterized in their own different ways. You have your pivot joint, which you're going to find more in your neck. So your head pivots to the right or left, up and down. You have a hinge joint where you're going to find it in places like your knee and your elbow. It hinges like a door, and that's the only direction it goes. You have saddle joints. You're going to find those in your fingers. You have condyloid joints, which you find in your wrist. It's basically similar to like a hinge joint, but allows a little bit more movement on the side-to-side range. Then you have plane joints, which you find them in your feet or in your hands. And there's a lot of planes, like open planes, where they're connected and they can move, but they're not actually all bending. So it's like a puzzle piece that's kind of glued together that moves, unlike your skull. And then you have the ball and sockets, which are some of the bigger joints, like your hip joint, your shoulder joint. They allow full range of movement. You can move your arm up and down, side to side, circle it. So that's the ball and socket joint. Okay, so here's some, so that's basically the end of it, but let's just review real quickly. Remember, we have the 3 muscle tissues under muscle cells. 1, 2, 3. Remember this one, it's branched, 1 nucleus, striated. Remember I mentioned the cardiac muscle. The heart has all, if you look at an image of a heart, it looks like it has branches coming out. So it's going to go with that. Then we have this one here, the cylindrical muscle cell. It's got the striated, it's a multinucleus. It's long, think of a long bone, skeletal muscle. And then we have smooth muscle. So think of it as it's smooth. It has none of these lines, okay? We have 1 nucleus, and we're going to find these in places like internal organs, like the stomach and the bladder, which causes those involuntary movements. We don't control it. Autonomic nervous system, same for the cardiac. We do control the skeletal muscle. We tell our body to bend that arm. Okay, there you go. And we have some flashcards here. And
Cool. Thank you, Melissa. So that looks like the end of the lesson. I don't know if you want to go over a few of those. We got a couple of minutes left. So why don't you maybe just hit a couple of those bullet points, and then if you guys have any questions that you want to put in the chat, now would be the time to do it. We can kind of cover those. And I know it was a lot of material, and there's probably tons of questions. And if we had to rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10 on how we feel about the muscular system, there's probably still some confusion, which is natural. You're not going to get it by just seeing it for a short amount of time. You're going to have to spend some time on it, and that's kind of what we are able to offer with at least this online course. And this lesson module is kind of just the beginning. One thing that we're not doing in this group tutoring session, and maybe Melissa, if you can scroll all the way up to the top of this lesson, there are video lessons as well. So we've got a video lesson here, and I don't know, it's probably something like 10 minutes at least. How long is it? Yeah, about 12 minutes. So there's a whole video lesson as well that can kind of help you guys understand that, this particular system, if you have the online course. And then there's also a question bank that has questions just on the muscular system. So if you have the course, check that out. You'd have a set of like 30 or 40 questions just for the muscular system.
Okay, so just a quick review about, everything we went over. Muscle is a fibrous tissue that helps our bodies move, helps us, support the body, and it helps generate heat for the body. We didn't really talk too much about that, but think of it as, if you're standing outside in the cold and you're like, oh, I'm so cold, so let me jog in place. You're moving your muscles, your body's generating heat as you move them, and it warms you up. That's like, even if you just go out for a run and you start sweating, your body is really warmed up. Okay, so we have 3 muscle types within the body. There's the cardiac, the smooth, the skeletal. The cardiac and the smooth are under involuntary control, means we do not control it. The autonomic nervous system controls it for us. Whereas the skeletal muscle is under voluntary control. We can control that, and we tell our muscles when we want to move. The cardiac and the skeletal muscles are striated, whereas the smooth muscle is non-striated. There's no stripes within that smooth muscle in the organs. We have 3 types of muscle tissues that make up a skeletal muscle: the epimysium, the endomysium, paramysium. Here's where things started to get a little fuzzy. Go back, know these terms, know the epimysium, the endomysium, the paramysium. Where are they? What are they? And what do they do? The single skeletal muscle fibers consist of several contractile units called myofibrils, and they are made up of actin and myosin myofilaments. Understand those terms as well. Then we talked about the slide filament theory, where the actin and the myosin form the cross bridges to shorten a sarcomere, which shortens a skeletal muscle, which is kind of the action of what happens when, you know, you're doing the contraction of the muscle. You're moving it. Tendons attach muscles to bones and they help them move. So tendons, muscle, bone, TMB. Ligaments, bone to bone, LBB, a way that I've always remembered it. We have several joints, and this is where the bones move in certain, you know, meeting spots of each bone. There's several different types of joints. We saw that over here. Several types of joints. They move in different ways. So just know what type of a joint, know all the joints and know what they do. Know where you can find an example of that joint. And muscles work in pairs to move the bones, right? We need two of them to help contract and elongate the muscles in our body. All right, so that's it. I know that's a lot. Some of it's a little confusing because it really breaks it down. I feel with anything with cells and you start breaking things down real tiny, it does get a little bit confusing. So know the anatomy of the muscle, know what muscles do, where you find them, what kind of muscles we have. And once you get to the fine parts of it, look at images, look at videos, write it out, write down the terms, know what the terms are, and review it and practice it. And that's really how you're going to drill it into your brain and remember it, even if it's the first time you're learning it or if it's a review for you, a fuzzy review. Drilling those terms and images are really going to help you out, okay? And that's what anatomy and physiology is. You have the anatomy, what is it, and the physiology, what it does. So know those things.
Cool. Thank you so much, Melissa. Everybody give Melissa a thank you. And we hope you guys found this to be helpful. Thank you for this. And then for anyone else, if you're interested, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to walk through just what our online course is all about and what it has to offer you to help you prepare for and pass your tests. And then I'll also go over just some kind of anecdotal things on how you can use things like timed practice tests and why they're important and how you should be using them, and that in relation to like the scored reports and some other things like that. So it might be helpful for you guys. Let me know in the chat if you guys want to stick on for that. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Okay, so this is the TEAS course, and like I said, the HESI and Kaplan are going to be very similar. So the way that this is organized is going to be by each section of the test. So the course is kind of composed of all the sections that you'll have. So for the TEAS, it's reading, math, English, and science. And if we click into any of these sections, it's kind of broken out by the main topics and then the subtopics within each of those areas. So I'll maybe go into, I don't know, science, and this will be A&P, organization of systems, and maybe we can take a look at the cardio lesson. And so we'll pull up the cardio lesson module, and each of these lesson modules are composed of a couple different things. You have an idea if you just saw Melissa going through that muscular system, but it's going to include video lessons, and throughout the entire course, there's about 100 different video lessons. And there is also all the kind of written material. There's flashcards down at the end, and there's a lot of interactive type questions, things that you're not going to get in a study guide book. And we do have a study guide book. You can purchase that on Amazon, but you just get so much more with the online course, things that you can't do with the book. And so you'll see that with like some of these interactive questions, and then the answer explanations and the rationales are much, much longer, much more in depth in the online course. That's because you can't really put it into a book without that book being 800 pages. So our TEAS book is something like 380 pages, but that'd be one of the differences that you'll see with the online course. So let me just expand this a little bit. You know, I'm usually not on here at night, but there is a night mode that you can use as well. I've asked people which they like better, and almost all say they like the day mode, so I'll just keep it on there. But what you'll see is, yeah, like we said, there's video lessons, and in the cardiovascular lesson, there's 2 video lessons, and you know, these are going to be about, I don't know, this is about 11 minutes, and this is going to be about the same. All the video lessons are between 5 and 15 minutes. And if you're more of a visual learner or an auditory learner, these are perfect for you. You can play these while you're driving or just on the go on your headphones. You can listen to these. And they're going to kind of walk through and explain the lesson similar to what the written material here is. So you have that option to kind of start off with that. And then as we go through this, you know, like we said, you guys just sat through the whole group tutoring. You have an idea of what the lessons are. So there'll be lots of illustrations and images and lots of questions within each lesson that are testing you on the material that you just sort of studied. And as we move down, you'll start to see some more interactive type questions, whether it's maybe a fill in the blank, or you'll get things where you have to like drag and drop things or sort the different elements of the heart valves here. And now all your questions on the test are going to be multiple choice questions, but that's not always the best way to learn. Sometimes you need to actually do what's called active recall, where you need to recall the information that you just learned, so that your brain is kind of working to retrieve that information and bring it back. And it's not always the same when you have just multiple choice questions. So we built these into the lessons, and there's quite a few of these just in this cardiovascular lesson. An EKG chart where you're going to have to label that and put all the corresponding parts labeled correctly. And then you'll have a review at the end. And again, we'll label the heart here starting at 1 all the way to 13. And we would move these accordingly to label that diagram. And with A&P, that's actually one of the best things you can do is you can study a diagram like this that's all labeled for you. But if you can't label it yourself and do that pretty competently, it's when you can do that, it's a really good sign that you've actually learned the material, you've mastered it, and it's something that you can feel really confident about and kind of move on to practice tests and just start practicing the questions because you know the material now. So those are kind of different types of questions. And then down at the end of each lesson is a set of flashcards, and these are just going to be cardiovascular system flashcards. There's about 26 of them here, and you can go through this and mark it that you got it right, and it'll take it out of the flashcard deck. Or you can turn it and mark it that you got it wrong, and it'll keep it in. And the more that you mark you got right, it will continue to take those out until you're just left with the questions that you got, or the flashcards that you're getting wrong. And then if you refresh this lesson, it'll kind of reset that. So that's the lesson module, pretty comprehensive. If you guys have questions about that, let me know, drop it in the chat, and I can kind of explain anything further. Other than that, I'll keep moving, and I want to go to the next part of the course, which is going to be the practice tests. And this is one of the most important things that you guys can do to actually study for the test once you're getting better at the material. And it's really actually the place that you want to start. So you want to start with practice test 1, the diagnostic test, before you do anything, before you even kind of get into this course, because what it's going to do is help you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. And that's going to be from the scored report that we'll see here in just a second. So I'll just kind of stick with science, and I'll pull this up. And once I start this, it is going to start the timer. And for the TEAS, the time is 103 minutes for the science section, 53 questions. And this is really important because the test is about 3.5 hours long. So this is like running a marathon for your brain, right? And you would not show up to a marathon having trained, the most you ran was 2 or 3 miles. You're not going to show up to run 26 miles without kind of running through the whole thing as far as you can, as much as you can before that race day. And so this test is going to be the same. So you want to be able to have done more than one of these practice tests, as many as you can, and there's 8 of these practice tests. You want to have done these all the way through all the sections, the full 3.5 hours, so that your brain can get used to having kind of that capacity and the endurance to sit through the whole test. And what happens if you're not doing that, a lot of people will get into the actual test, they'll get into the 3rd hour of the test, and they start having brain farts, and they're just fatigued, and they're not doing well on the last section. They're getting to the last back half of that last section, and their brain's fried because they're not used to sitting through this type of a duration. So having the time test, for all those reasons, is super important. So you can go through this test and answer all the questions. You can review questions. If I click on any, you can review them to go back to them. And that's actually how the actual TEAS is structured. When you're in any particular section, you can flag a question, go back to it before you end the section. So this is going to be very similar. And again, these practice tests are very, very similar to the actual test, not only in the way that the test works, where you can flag questions, it's timed, it's the same number of questions, but the questions are actually very similar. They're asked in the same way, they're the same level of difficulty. And we've gone through many iterations of these practice tests to actually get them where they are today. We've been doing this for about 5 years and have changed these tests many times to get them where they are now to be very accurate to what you'll actually see on your test. It's a very good representation. So I'm just going to go to the end of the test. It looks like a chemistry question. I'll answer it. I'll finish the test section, and it is going to bring up a scored report. Now, this scored report breaks down all of the topics within the science section. And, I didn't answer all the questions, but if you did, I actually answered one of those chemistry questions, and I can see that I did not get it right. But what you would see here if you took the whole test is that you got 100% in certain topics. You got a 75% in certain topics, a 33%, and maybe a 0% in certain topics. So roughly this breaks down to, you're going to get a few questions on the cardiovascular system, a few questions on the muscular system, biology, chemistry, so on and so forth. And so you get an idea that you answered all of the muscular systems incorrect. So you can start to get an idea that that's one of your weak areas because you got all the questions wrong. And maybe cardiovascular system, you got 100% of the questions right. You're probably good on that. You'd be better off focusing on the muscular system, which is kind of clearly one of your weak areas. So that's how you use this. And then, like I said, take this as soon as you get the course so that you can get an idea of where you really want to direct your time, how you want to create your study schedule, which topics you want to be studying up front, opposed to saving for later once you've mastered some of those weak areas. So as I go in here, I'll just click View Questions, and then this is going to bring up the answer explanations. And I would say about 4 months ago, we went through and rewrote something like 1,300 practice test question answer explanations to be much more in-depth, explain why you're getting the answer right or wrong, why the answer choices are right or wrong. We put in kind of more visual explanations, and if a illustration or a diagram helped explain why that answer was right or wrong, those are now in there. And again, you can kind of see from like how in-depth this answer explanation is, something that you can't put in the in a print book study guide. So it's just something that makes the online course more of an advantage than the actual study guides that you can purchase. So that is the practice test, and then this is the scored report, but we actually go a step further with the scored report. So if I go to my test results, I can pull up a more detailed one that's going to give me a little more information that's really going to help me, again, pinpoint not only the topics that I might be weak at, but there's another important component to taking this test, and that is the timed aspect of it. And so I went into a math practice test that I had taken, and what's important here is that you need to be able to answer all the questions within the section in the time given. So for math, it comes out to something like, for the TEAS, you have about 1 minute per question. So one cool thing that this scored report does, and again, if you click the statistics icon, you can navigate to this. It's going to give you that scored report again. It's going to, for that practice test, organize the questions by the topic within math here. And you can see you had 4 questions on addition and subtraction of fractions. And You can press the view button to get that answer explanation. But what's really cool is that we actually track the time you spent per question. So a lot of times for math, for example, word problems trip people up, or they take more than that 1 minute allotted time. And so what you can kind of see is as you're going through, it could really be any of these topics for you, but you might see decimals and fractions. You were going way over 1 minute. You were spending 3 minutes on those questions. And then other topics, you were spending 30 seconds. So equations with one variable, you're able to solve those really quick. Other topics, not so much. And so again, it gives you a more of a compass on and a guide for what you should be trying to improve upon. Not only that particular topic that you might not be getting questions wrong, but you might identify questions that you did get correct, but you took way too long to answer. So that's a kind of a totally different thing. And this is all kind of a numbers game and trying to work within the time frame. So that's why the score report that has a little more detail, it can be super, super helpful for you guys. Now you have 8 practice tests, which should be more than enough. And then you'll have a practice question bank by topic. And so what this lets you do is if you have identified a particular topic within, say, math or science that you need more practice with, you can dive into just those questions, whereas the practice test has all the topics within the math practice test. But if you are saying math and you know, for example, those word problems were tripping you up and you're taking too long, I need to practice those and I need to get faster at them. So I can go over to the question bank and I've got 103 word problems here that I can practice and just try to get faster and faster with those questions. Now I know word problems, this one has more than probably what's typically in the question bank. I think you're probably going to get about 30 to 40 questions per topic. But every single topic has its own question bank, so you can practice just those questions to kind of try and get quicker and quicker. And then the last part is, and so you'll have that for anatomy, physiology, biology, chemistry, English, and down the line. And then the last part is going to be the flashcards. So the flashcards are in the lesson modules, and they're kind of broken down into smaller sets of flashcards. So you do have just cardiovascular flashcards in that lesson. But if you want to do a larger flashcard set, you can do the entire anatomy and physiology flashcard set. So there'd be 259 flashcards just in this section. And you can go through these and mark them whether you got them right or wrong, and it'll start to filter out the questions that you got right. So you're just working on the flashcards that you got wrong. So you can do all the anatomy and physiology, or if you go over to any particular lesson, you can do flashcards just on that particular topic or lesson. Then you'd have like all the life and physical science, it's your biology, just your chemistry flashcards. So you guys get the idea how that works, and it's going to be the same for math and English, and I think reading and English are in these flashcards here. So that's the whole course. So this really is a lot of material. It's really should be enough to get you there so that you are getting the scores that you need to get into your program. And we've had thousands of people use the online course, and tons and tons of great feedback that we have taken over time to continue making this better and better. Even just within the past year, we've added so much to this course. That question bank is new, the expanded answer explanations, and we're always kind of making these practice tests better and kind of changing them and getting them to where they need to be. Other than that, we'll wrap the call up. We really appreciate you guys joining us. We hope this was helpful, and let us know. And if you're in the Facebook group, please let us know if you found it helpful, so that others can know that and continue to join our future group tutoring sessions. All right, cool. So I'm not seeing anything from anybody else in the chat. So we appreciate the time that you spent with us, and I'll go ahead and end it here, and then look for those replays soon, as well as announcements on future group tutoring sessions. All right, thanks guys. Have a great night.